In this video, I will show you some very interesting lines in the Queen's Gambit. So we're going to take a look at the Queen's Gambit. This is my first video in the Queen's Gambit series, and we are going to be taking a look at the Queen's Gambit accepted. So what to do after black takes your pawn. And I will show you two main things today, and those are mainly the most commonly played openings online, and that's why this is a really important lesson. So first off, black of course doesn't have to capture. So there are many different variations for black, but the most played move in general is to capture. So we are going to take a look at this first, and then the other variations in future videos. I recommend, if you play the Queen's Gambit, to play your pawn to e4 on the second move, which is also known as the Saduletto variation. The reason why is basically because I think everything else is a little bit more drawish, probably. And pawn to e4 is the most aggressive one, because white immediately puts 2 pawns in the center. We can recapture here, and you will see I have found some really amazing lines you can play here. So black, actually the most played move by black is pawn to b5, which I don't really like for black. We're going to take a look at that first, and then also at e6 and knight to f6. So b5. And the main goal with this for black is black saying, well, you gave me a free pawn, I'm going to try to hold on to that pawn and see if I can keep it. Sometimes you can punish this in the Queen's Gambit by trying to win a rook here on a8, but that's not possible if your pawn is here on e4. So we're going to have to fight back against this pawn center. And the most straightforward thing to do here is to immediately play pawn to a4, challenging this pawn on b5. And now black has to make a decision, and black has to defend this, because otherwise we are just going to capture. a6 never really works in these variations, of course, because otherwise black would be losing the rook. So most of the time you will probably get c6 or bishop d7, which isn't really good either. We're going to take a look at that in a moment. So c6, the thing you have to do here is just trade, because we are trying to create weaknesses on the queen side. And now you can say, well, black still has the structure, but we're going to try to attack it. And it's basically impossible for black to try and hold on. And the thing we are going to do is play knight to c3. And knight to c3 immediately attacks this pawn. And now black has to defend it. And a6, of course, again, doesn't really work because of this trade. And then white can just capture here this rook in the corner. So that doesn't really work. And it's pretty difficult here for black to hold on. The most played move, almost 1 in every 2 games, is bishop d7. Pawn a6, also very popular, but I just showed you it doesn't work. So bishop d7. And against bishop d7, there is this amazing line you can use to get a winning advantage. And this is actually almost never played by white. So it's a rather obscure line that's not well known. And that is to play pawn to d5. And pawn to d5, you should not immediately understand why this move works, but you will see in a moment why this move works. Well, the thing is, it's now black to move. And black can actually no longer develop this knight. Black can develop this knight, but it's rather bad because he will just get attacked. So basically what black is going to do is play either e6 or e5. And whatever they play, we are just going to capture that with our pawn. And then black has to recapture, and they can choose to capture with the bishop or with the pawn. And most players actually capture this with the pawn. Because of course, if they capture with the bishop, you can trade, they lose their right to castle, and then you can just pick up this free pawn as well. So basically, most players, I think almost about 90% here, capture with the pawn. And now you just have an amazing attack. And that is knight takes b5. So they are trying to save this pawn, but you can still capture it. Because after the bishop takes, there is queen h5. Queen h5 is a check, but also a double attack. So black has to do something, most likely g6. You can pick up this bishop. You also give a check. Black has to block, and then you can also pick up this pawn. So now you went from being down a pawn to being up a pawn, and the black structure is also completely destroyed. White has a pretty easy time. You can just develop some pieces, be safe, castle, and you just have an easy game. Black doesn't really have a safe space for the king either. So that is the main idea here. As I said, if they play pawn to e5, you can also take. It's basically the same variation. If they play knight f6, they are also losing immediately because of e5. And if you take a look at this knight, you will realize it basically has nowhere to go. So the knight has to go back. And now there is this most amazing tactic, which is pawn to e6. Attacking the bishop, and also this pawn. and black just doesn't have a response. Of course, they are probably gonna take, and then you're just gonna recapture. And now if black takes here, they are in trouble because of queen f3, and queen f3 attacks the rook. So white has to play knight e7, and then there is queen to e4. And this is just amazing because this bishop again is under attack and it doesn't really have a safe square. It probably has to go back, and you should already see here that this is starting to be quite problematic for black. You can take here on b5, so that's a free pawn. And then if black tries to do something, you just have this, and this is a checkmate. This is a smothered mate. And black's already lost. And of course, black can also try something else. For example, here, pawn to e6. But then you can just take the rook, give a check, and then also win back this queen. So let's say the king moves over, you can win back the queen. And white is just completely winning in every line. So, as I said, against this early pawn to b5, there are many really good variations for white. So if you face this and you know this ID, with being really aggressive, with playing this a4, d5, you should always be fine. And then the second thing we're going to take a look at here is a little bit of a different variation where black captures this. We are playing e4, but black's like, okay, you can take the pawn back, it's fine. And that's actually the second most played move by black. So in this variation, you will also get this a lot. The same goes basically for knight f6 in many lines. That's just going to transpose as well. So pawn to e6. So we're going to capture this with the bishop. That was the entire plan. We tried to take up the center, develop the bishop, and you can already see that white is just a little bit better here because we have bishop in the center and we have two central pawns as well. And a good thing that black could probably do is play c5 in many of these lines, but c5 is actually not that popular of a move. It's not played that much by black, especially online. You almost never get c5. So I'm going to keep c5 for a future video. Today we're going to take a look at the most popular moves by black, which is knight to f6. And I found some really amazing lines here. So, and they are really easy to remember as well, because we have the center and black is just attacking the pawn. So we're going to defend the pawn. And then almost everyone with the black pieces will try to pin this knight, which of course is not a bad move, just because black would like to capture this pawn and in some way destabilize our center. There are other moves possible, but again, white is just winning in every variation because we always have a really amazing trap that basically arises in all of these lines. We are first going to play pawn to e5, and the goal is to get this knight out because this knight is an important defender of this enemy king side, and we are going to launch an attack on the enemy king really soon. So we try to get this knight out. The only thing is here you have to be a little bit careful because of course this is attacked 2 times, so you kind of want to defend it. So we are going to defend it with our bishop to d2. If black takes this, which is one of the most popular moves, we are just going to take with the pawn, always. Because we want to keep this bishop here on this diagonal, because we are going to use it for future tricks. And if black castles, this is just one of the lines. You can play queen to g4, and then black basically has to play pawn to f5 or pawn to f6 or try something. Because if black just plays a slow move, we have bishop h6. And bishop h6, now we are attacking this twice, and this is threatening a checkmate. And there's no way to defend this for black except playing pawn to g6 and then dropping the rook as well. So white is just winning in this line. We're just winning material. And even if black tries to defend with something like f5, I'm just going to show you a quick line. For example, takes. You can always develop the knight and then you can castle. So that's fine as well. But there are many sub variations, but basically everything leads to the same. So for example here, let's say they play bishop e7, for example. They don't pin the knight, they play bishop e7. You just have to know this main ID. e5, we push away the knight and we play queen g4. It's always the same. We are attacking this. Even if they are not castled yet, we're going to attack it. And if they castle, we're always going to play bishop h6 and then just win the rook. So it's pretty simple to remember this. If they play knight c6 in this line, that's also possible. We're going to develop the knight, we're going to castle, and then we're going to get a position like this, which is really solid as well. So also not that hard to remember. And here we are even gambiting a pawn because we have rook to e1, and we are basically trying to force black to take here, and we're going to lead them down this trick where we have a queen to b3. And queen to b3, we are attacking this knight, and if you look at this knight can actually not go anywhere. So against this knight c6 line, we are just gambiting this pawn in the center so we can then trap the knight potentially. And even if black goes back, that's actually not so good, because you can see we have this lined up, we can push d5 and everything is gonna explode. And if you want to see all of these variations, you should definitely check out my Lichess study, which is in the Discord group. So again, and this variation, many amazing lines for white. Another thing I wanted to show is just a sub variation. For example, here, if we play e5 and they decide to go to e4, which is also possible because they want to attack this twice instead of going to d5. You can play queen d3 here. So queen d3, you are attacking the knight, and we are always trying to do the same thing, trying to force some exchange, trying to have this pawn here, take away the square. After they move, we're going to go here with the queen. After they castle, we're going to go here with the bishop, g6, and we simply win a rook. So this idea is just there in every single line. Another thing I wanted to show you is if you go for this early e5 push and black decides to not move the knight, but instead capture here, you can just recapture, and again, this knight has to move somewhere, for example here, and now we can just play the queen out. If they castle, we have this bishop h6 and we win the rook. So that's the main idea I wanted to show you, that you can basically always have this same tactic, always play for this, and it's really solid. Another thing is, of course, black can also be a little bit more safe. For example, let's say takes, and here black might realize that, okay, I actually can't castle, because if I castle, I'm gonna run into this queen g4, bishop h6. It's always the same problems that black runs in. So black can try to play something else, but if you take a look at this, let's just say knight to e7, for example, knight to d7, or maybe bishop d7, doesn't really matter. You can still always go for this plan with white. You can just play queen to g4, you can attack this pawn. What is black gonna do? Are they gonna castle? If they castle, you always have this bishop h6. If they don't castle, maybe they have to play something like g6. But this structure is just so weak for black, because there is no dark squared bishop here to defend all of these holes. And you can, for example, play something like bishop to g5, attack the queen. And this queen is just under attack, and it's really hard to defend this, because this square is really needed by black, this f6 square, and they don't have it. So they might have to play a really defensive move here. But you can already tell this is not what you want to play as black. All of your pieces are jumbled up. You can't really castle. You can always get checkmates in many lines. Here on g7 as well. So it's really hard. And white, you can just do normal developing moves. And as I said, if they castle, we can basically play for tricks. We can put pressure here. Let's say they defend. Everything is just losing. We can castle, and this king side is going to fall apart really soon. For example, a6. And you can always break open the position with d5 as well. Even if they take, you can take. This knight is pinned. Everything is just falling apart for black. So that's why I think you should definitely play this variation with this early e4 push. And then you should always aim to play for this position. Where we are, and that's just the key idea to remember, we're always going to push e5 no matter where this bishop is. We want to kick this knight out of this square. Trading here is actually not that good for black. And then in the future, we're always going to play our queen to g4. And that's just really hard to defend from the black side. The only real thing to do for black is to go for an earlier c5 and try to fight back for the center. But if you want to learn more about this, you should watch my other videos on the Queen's Gambit. In this video, I will show you some very aggressive attacking options if you want to play the Queen's Gambit. And we are going to take a look at the Queen's Gambit accepted. So basically when black captures our pawn here on c4, and we are always going to play pawn to e4. In this video, we will focus especially on the variations where black plays the early e5 or c5. And these early e5 and c5 moves are not something you will see quite a lot at the lower level online, but as you are rising up the rating ladder, you will see these variations more and more often, because those are the top grandmaster responses to the Queen's Gambit. So we are first going to take a look at e5, which is probably the most popular of the two, and also one of the most difficult to deal with white if you don't know what you are doing. So black basically gambits a pawn here, but taking this is not really a good idea as white, because first of all, we are just creating doubled pawns. Black's going to capture here, we are not going to be able to castle, and black's just going to win back this pawn anyways. So we don't want to go for this as white. I see many players also go wrong here and push to d5, but this is structurally not so good actually, because black is just still up a pawn, might just defend this in the future, and also this centrum can be attacked by black. And I found a really interesting variation you can try to beat players when they go for e5. And that is to go for knight f3 first, which is one of the main lines here. Basically, instead of capturing, we are going to allow black to capture us. So we're going to play out the knight, and now we are attacking this pawn 2 times. So really easy to remember, we just want to attack this pawn twice. And most likely black is going to capture you, which is going to lead to our variation. Of course, black doesn't have to capture you, but if they don't, we already have 2 pieces lined up here. Sometimes they try to play something like bishop g4 instead, thinking, well, we are going to pin this knight, but that's actually not so good, because we can just capture here. And let's say we go for this trade. Now all of a sudden we have a checkmate threat here, and we still are threatening to win this pawn. And if black tries anything else, for example moving out the knight, black is actually also losing, because we have sacrificing the bishop, and then we can take here with check, and then we will also be able to win a piece here after the king move. So for example in this variation. So those are some interesting tricks to know, because actually bishop g4 is also very common in these lines, and often you have this trick where you can sacrifice or give a check with the queen and also come in here on this side of the board. And I think the only other thing you will sometimes see is they will check here, but that's never really a problem, because you can basically just block with the knight. But most of the time black is going to capture here. And if they do, you will see we basically have the opportunity right now to recapture here with either the knight or the queen, but we are not going to do that. We are going to capture here on c4. And the plan is just we are developing the bishop, we are attacking this weak f7 pawn, which is going to be a target of attack in many of these lines, and we are going to try and win this pawn back in the future. We still have some time to do that. And here black will almost always go for knight c6, because of course they want to defend this pawn, which has been attacked twice. Other moves by black, I think sometimes you might also get them to give you this check, but that's not really a problem. You can play knight to d2, and we are going to transpose to our main line. So knight to c6, and black is basically defending this, so we can no longer capture. And here there are many different variations, but most of them are pretty boring and also just not that good for white. So I tried coming up with the most aggressive line, and I found a really interesting way to play here as white. And that is to remember this idea to play knight to d2. And knight to d2 might seem a little bit passive at first, but we're going to get some crazy attacking chances. The main goal here is we are just going to develop the knight and protect this pawn, because black will almost always at some point play knight to f6 and then also attack here. And we are going to try in many lines to put the queen here and put double pressure here. Sometimes the knight might actually also join in some variations. Sometimes we will also just be able to start pushing here with this pawn, and we are going to create a lot of problems for black. So this is more of a preparation move. Here again there are multiple options for black. The main option I'm going to continue with for this variation is if black plays bishop b6, because as I said, we could also have gotten to this point in a different move order with bishop to b4 first. Something else you will probably see a lot is moves like bishop g4, but I just told you that you always have tricks here, and the good thing with this is that your queen is actually doing a double attack. So black has to defend both of these at the same time, and that's not really possible. Let's say they play queen d7, trying to defend this. Well, actually now you can capture, and after they take, you can just capture here. And that might seem a little bit crazy, but the goal was we were going to distract the queen with the bishop sacrifice, and now we are attacking this rook, we are attacking this knight. Let's say they save the rook, we can take here with check, so black is in a lot of trouble. So you always have very interesting lines here if they go for something like bishop g4, very aggressive options. The same goes for knight f6. If they play knight f6, we are just going to go for the attack here. And then black's going to have to defend, we can castle, and you will also get similar lines as we will see in this video. The thing with bishop b4 is that queen b3 is still possible, but queen b3 was especially strong because we had a double attack, right? We had this attack on f7 and also this attack on this b7 pawn. And if the bishop is here, that's actually blocking us from attacking this b7 pawn. So that is how you can try and remember this. If the bishop is here, there's no point in going up with the queen, because you won't have a double attack. You will only have a single attack here, and black can defend that if he wants to. So that's really the interesting thing to remember here. There are a couple of moves you can play here. You can always castle, or you can play queen to b3. And I think both of those are possible and they lead to the same variation. Maybe queen b3 first is the most interesting option, because you are in a way still forcing white to defend. But as I said, this is not the most crucial move here. You can always castle, you could play a3, you can do a lot of things. But I have a really interesting line with queen b3, because we are attacking, so black has to defend. Probably something like queen e7, right? Trying to defend this. And then we are gonna castle. So as I said, you can also play it the other way around. Doesn't matter too much. And then, let's say black plays knight f6. Of course, they want to try and castle. We are going to go for this move a3. So again, as I said, many of these ideas, you can just combine them. It's more the general plan that counts. So we are going to challenge this bishop, most likely get a trade, and then we are going to take back here with the bishop. And this is just the main idea you have to remember. You can go for this a3 move, you can go for this queen b3 move, you can castle. And then we are always going to give away this pawn for free here in the center. And this is actually a poison pawn. If black takes this, he is immediately losing. So let's say black takes this with the knight, while we actually have rook e1 attacking the knight, and the knight is kind of stuck, because if the knight moves, well, we would be able to capture the queen. So let's say they castle, and then we have a crazy move like bishop g5. We are attacking the queen, and the queen can actually not go anywhere here. So yeah, let's say they go back here to e8 because they have to move. You can always play bishop here, and bishop here is a double attack, and we are going to be able to win this knight. And you can think, well, why can't black play f6 or f5? Well, this pawn is pinned to the king, so that's not possible. So if they capture here with the knight, you can always pin with the rook, play bishop g5, and you are going to win material. If they capture here with the queen, well, you basically just have rook here, and the queen is pinned to the king, so you immediately win material. So black should not capture this, but I think some players will probably try and capture this with the knight, because it's easy to miss this idea with bishop g5. If they don't capture us, we are going to defend it, because now that the king is castled, we don't want them to capture this pawn for free. And let's say black plays bishop to g4. The main idea, as I said, if you have exhausted all of your ideas with pawn a3, capturing with the bishop, castling, putting the rook here, if you are just running out of ideas, the goal is just to start pushing this e-pawn down the board. Because you have to remember, we are in this position still down a full pawn. We should still at some point try to win this back, or try to win something back, because we might be in trouble. Again, you might think, well, why would white play this? They are giving away this pawn. Of course, they can also play a pawn to b6. But basically, every line here is losing for black. So even if they play something like pawn to b6, they are going to lose, because we always have this idea with pawn to e5. And after pawn to e5, well, this knight has to move. It doesn't really have a lot of good squares. So let's say we go back, right? Doesn't really matter. And every variation, we're always going to keep pushing. So we're going to push e5, e6. And you will see that all of this is beautifully lined up against the enemy king. And of course, if white takes this, he's in a lot of trouble, because actually we can take with the rook, attack the queen, and also attack this knight, and we have some discovered checks as well. So black is just dead lost in all variations here. So black cannot capture this. But even if black doesn't capture this, they have to move the queen. Let's say, for example, let's say queen f6, for example. Well, here we can just take this knight for free. And if black tries to move the knight, which is also possible, of course, we can take here, and this is protected twice. If the king moves, well, we can now win the queen. So many really interesting lines here. The main goal is just, as I said, play a3, capture here with the bishop, rook out, and then e4, e5, e6, just keep pushing. There are many different lines, but you will always win material somewhere. So this is a really interesting way of trying to fight against this early e5 by black. There are more lines that I didn't show in this video. You can always check out the lead chess study in my Discord group if you want to see every single line and also go through this opening yourself. Then the next thing we are going to take a look at here is Queen's Gambit accepted. Again, we're going to play e4. And here, this line with e6, we already talked about this in my previous video. The main goal for black is to play in many variations knight f6, develop the bishop, castle. But against all of those lines, you do have some really amazing tricks, which I covered in the previous video. Right here, we are going to recapture and we are going to focus on what to do if black goes for an early c5 push, because that's a little bit more aggressive option for black. So we definitely need to cover that as well. But I'm going to go here with knight f6 first. c5 is also possible, but it doesn't really matter. Knight f6 first is the most popular, attacking the pawn, so we are going to defend. This is still similar to what we have seen before, but here black is going to play this early c5 push. So what can you do against this early c5? Well, against early c5, my recommendation is to push pawn to d5 and just take up a little bit more space in the center. You can capture here, but after you capture here, you will notice that if you do this, you will have to take back with the knight and then you lose this pawn here. So you probably have to take back with the king. And I don't think that's what you want. And if you don't capture, black is going to capture and you will lose your central pawn majority. So here I think pushing is a really good option. Most players with black will capture because capturing is also the best move. If they don't capture, they are also usually in trouble. So we are going to capture back. And white just has a really strong central pawn here, 2 developed pieces, and black doesn't really have anything good going for him. And there are some really interesting tricks that you have in this line. There are many possibilities for black, and I'm going to show you the most played variation, which is bishop d6. There are different lines for black. a6, bishop e7, sometimes queen e7 check. Which is immediately losing. Queen e7 is immediately losing. There are crazy lines here actually. King f1 is winning immediately, but you can also play knight e2. But we're going to cover that a little bit later. The first thing I want to talk about here is what if they play bishop to d6. So the main problem here for black is actually that black's pieces are terribly placed and we have a winning attack as white. And you might not see that right away because you think, well, we just have 2 pieces here. How can we have a winning attack, right? But we do have one against pretty much anything black tries. And it almost always starts with playing queen to e2. And queen to e2 is a really interesting move because we are giving a check. We are winning a little bit of time. We're also getting our queen involved with the attack. And the most popular response here by black is to play queen to e7. And then you just straight up have knight b5. And knight b5 basically threatens to take this bishop for free because this queen is pinned. There are a couple of options for black. If black castles, well, actually you can take, and then go here, and you're simply winning this rook because black doesn't have any way to save it. If black sees this and they try to capture here, well, you can just recapture, and still we are attacking this bishop. The bishop has to move, but in many lines we're also threatening to play knight to c7 here. So yeah, this bishop has to move, but if you look at this, where is it going to go? Like you could think maybe it can go here to e5, but then you have pawn to f4 attacking the bishop, and the bishop basically has nowhere to go. And wherever it goes, we always have knight c7 with a check and also pick up this rook. So the black pieces are really jumbled up here, really in a bad spot, and you will be able to win. As I said, this basically works against anything. The best defense probably is pawn a6, which we're going to cover in a bit. For example, as I said, queen e7, you can play knight here. They can play bishop g4, you can castle, they can take, none of this really matters. And then you will see that here again, in every line you are still going to go for this knight b5 ID. And black has to try and defend this. Let's say they go here, but then you can push pawn to d6, and you're going to go for this ID anyways. So really strong. The best thing you have to do in this position is just remember this ID with knight b5 and then trying to pick up the rook. And that is just the best plan against this variation for black. If black really knows what they are doing, or they studied the classical defense against the queen's gambit, they might play pawn to a6. Pawn to a6 is really good because, well, black can play pawn to b5, attacking her bishop, but also pawn to a6 actually stops this knight from coming in, so we won't have this knight c7 line anymore. So I think this is probably the best approach from the black side. If you face this, you can just play knight f3. Probably black's gonna attack you here, and that is actually a mistake we are trying to have black make. Because b5 here is actually not that good. If black plays regular moves, for example, bishop here, we still go for the queen, check right. For example, queen e7, castles, but everything is still fine because we don't have this knight b5, c7 idea. But if black goes for this b5 push, here, for this b5 push, which is the most played move, black is actually losing again because of a beautiful variation. Here you can just castle as white. You're just going to castle. And you're going to give away this bishop. Because now we have check with the rook. And, well, there's not really much black can do except blocking with this bishop, right? And then you just play pawn to d6. You're attacking the bishop. The bishop is pinned. And if they take this with the queen, well, now they just lost the full queen. Because this bishop cannot recapture since it is pinned. So after pawn to d6, I mean, there's not much black can do. If they castle, you actually get this, and you also get a fork. Even if they take your queen, right, you can always take here with check. So pretty incredible stuff. The best option for black is maybe to play something like knight c6, trying to defend this. But still crazy lines here. You can play bishop f4. You can also capture here if you want. So I think this is a really interesting line to play against this a6 variation. And anything else, really, there's not much for black, but almost everything will run into, at some point, knight b5, knight c7 check, pushing the pawn here, giving this check with the queen just to get some pieces pinned along this open file. In this video, I will show you a very amazing variation I found in the Queen's Gambit declined. It's a really aggressive attacking option that has almost never been played. So it's a really good try if you want to get some aggressive play in the Queen's Gambit. The Queen's Gambit declined happens after these moves, d4, d5, c4, pawn to e6. And I have to say, if you are someone who plays the Queen's Gambit, you probably know that these are some of the more boring variations, because it's pretty simple for black to just have an equal position. And as white, you can pretty much do anything you want. Almost every single legal move is actually a playable move. But I'm going to show you a really aggressive attacking framework you can use here. So I like to continue with knight to f3. And the main reason why is, most players play actually knight to c3 very early on to influence the center, but black is almost always going to play bishop b4 and pin your knight, and that's sometimes annoying. So we don't want to run into that, so we're going to play knight to f3, which is not really commonly played, but it's a really good variation. Black is going to play probably knight to f6. Of course, there are many different variations. I will show you at the end what you can do against all of the other lines, but knight to f6 is the most played move. And we are going to go ahead and play bishop to g5 immediately. So our plan here is to just pin this knight to the queen. And that's a little bit annoying for black, right? This knight was defending the center, also stopping us from at some points playing e4. So most likely black will try to unpin this knight. I think there's not much else you are going to see. Maybe sometimes h6, in which case I also recommend just capturing this knight, because now a defender has been removed here on d5. So most likely you're almost always going to get a bishop to e7. And now we are really happy, right? Because if this bishop is here on e7, well, we can actually put the knight to c3 without running into the annoying pin, because black would have to waste another move to play this pin. So we can play this. But I like to first play the move pawn to e3 here, because we always have to be a little bit careful. For example, here, and some variations, black can actually capture here and then try to defend, and he will just be up a pawn. It's still a decent position for white, but I don't want to run into that, so I try to play pawn to e3 as early as possible so that we can always recapture here with the bishop, right, if black ever captures here on c4. So that's an easy way to remember. You are going to play the knight, the bishop, close your pawn structure, and then we are going to have this bishop protected. Black, multiple moves are possible. Many things just transpose to other variations, so most likely they are going to castle. And then here we can play our knight to c3. And we are only playing it now because it's not really interesting for black to still pin, because they would just be repinning their own knight actually in that case. And then here black has to try and find a plan. And there's really not many things black can try. This bishop is not going to go to d7, so most likely black's going to play b6, bishop b7. Sometimes they play knight d7. Sometimes they play an early c5, so we are going to take a look at that a bit later in the video. But most often, black will try to play pawn to h6, because they want to kick away this bishop and make sure that this knight is no longer pinned. And it's against this variation, this specific line, that I have a really amazing attacking opportunity. And this is one of the most played variations in this line, so you will get this a lot. You can capture here, you can capture the knight, and black has to recapture. And we are going to go for a pretty insane attack on the king side. And we are going to start off by playing here queen to c2. So queen to c2, basically because we want to activate the queen down this diagonal, because those are going to be attacking opportunities in the future. And also we are not going to castle king side in this position. We are probably going to castle queen side. So that is why queen c2 is a good waiting move. And here still, black has some opportunities. Most players will in this position go for pawn to b6. And it's against this pawn to b6 idea that I have a very aggressive option. If they go pawn to c5, well, things are a little bit different. This might seem a little bit crazy because this is like a gambit line, but this is playable for black, something like this. Sometimes then, okay, we are going to castle king side and we're going to be safe. But against most lines, we are going to be able to do a very aggressive attacking option. So pawn to b6. And we are going to go crazy, straight up h4, pawn to h4. And we will completely destroy the enemy king side here. So pawn to h4, we're going to play pawn to g4, we're going to play pawn to g5, h5. Everything is going to open up. The queen was already looking at this where the rook will enter. We're going to castle, swing over the rook. This is going to be total madness. And this is completely new. This has almost never been played in the Queen's Gambit. So pawn to h4. Well, black's probably just going to continue with bishop b6. Some other variations are possible as well. But probably bishop b7, I mean, is the best or the most common approach, I'm going to say, for black. So we are going to capture here in the center. Usually you do this because you don't really want run into any problems here later on. It also helps here to weaken the black position a little bit by capturing. Okay, black can capture with the bishop as well if they want to, but I mean, we are just going to capture with the knight, so most likely they're going to capture with the pawn here. And then we're going to go all in for the attack. Pawn to g4. g4, h4, you can already see we have very aggressive options. And it's hard to tell you what the most played moves are here for black, because this position has almost never been played, but white is already winning. So I think the best move by the engine, and that's what I'm going to continue with, is bishop to e7, because we know that this is coming as black, so we're going to move the bishop first. But if they play something else, I think knight e7 is something you will also get. You often have g5 here. And of course, taking doesn't really work, because we can take, and now all of a sudden, this has opened up, and black just has to play g6 and drop the bishop. And that's the whole problem here. If we push, black's in a lot of trouble. And if black says, okay, I'm going to drop back now, well, actually, you can take here. Recapturing here, I don't think that's something you want to play. For example, queen f5. This rook is going to swing over. This bishop is going to be activated. This is undefendable from the black side. You're always going to run into checkmate, or you will have to sacrifice a rook or a queen to prevent it. So the best move here for black is bishop e7. And are you going to see that a lot? I don't even think so. I think you're going to see a lot of different moves, probably not bishop e7. But in general, the idea you have to remember is just to go all in with the attack. g5, break open as many lines as you can. Activate the queen, activate the bishop, maybe castle, activate the rooks. I can't show you every single variation, but I'm pretty sure you will find a checkmate in every single one of them. But I'm going to continue just with bishop e7 because this is the top move and your opponent might play this. So now we play g5, but the big advantage for black here is they can actually play h5. And this is a little bit more safe because, well, the bishop has already dropped back, the pawn is here on h5, so we don't really have a way to damage the structure straight away. So we're just going to continue. As I already said, we're going to castle, we're going to get our pieces involved, we're going to slowly build up the attack here. For example, knight to c6, and now we're going to go knight to e5. Knight to e5 is always a move in these lines, of course, activating the knight towards the enemy king. So I think black will probably take this and try to eliminate your knight if they can. For example, pawn to c6. There's not really much we can do for black anyways. And then we are going to continue with a really bonkers move here. So multiple things are possible, right? You can activate the bishop here. You can start pushing pawns. You can play the king over, you can activate the rook, but there's a really amazing line here as well. And I just want to show you this so you can maybe use this in your own games as well. And that's knight to e4. And knight to e4 is actually a pretty crazy move because we are giving away this knight, but of course black cannot capture this because otherwise they would be losing the queen. So for example, if black takes, we can take here, and then if black takes, well, for example, queen takes here, and black's just completely losing and down material. So we are gonna get the knight involved through this e4 square, so really sneaky. Probably black is gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna move this queen so at least I can capture this knight. But now we're gonna play something even more crazy. This knight's just gonna jump into f6, and that's just brutal. Giving a check to the king, of course, if the king moves, that's an immediate checkmate, right? Because this knight and this queen are working together on this h7 square. So basically black has to capture. If black captures with the bishop, that's not so good. You can capture both ways here. And of course we have an attack against the enemy king. But I would probably capture with this one because this was under attack by the queen. And this is really good for white as well. We have an attack on the enemy king. For example, after they play here, we can go in with the bishop. Sometimes we're going to sacrifice pretty crazy attacking lines as well. If they take with the pawn, well, we're going to recapture here. And now you can see we have this counterattack on this bishop. And, well, where is this bishop going to go? Is it going to go to e8? Then we have check here with the rook. This has to move. And then you can just go rook to g7. And we are basically working together with these two pieces to deliver the checkmate here on h7. And it's unstoppable, really. So this is my entire plan. If you play the Queen's Gambit and you face the Queen's Gambit declined, okay, you can get many different lines. Most of them are pretty boring, pretty drawish. That's fine, but it's really good to know this ID because this is a really common variation where you can try to force this attack with h4 and g4. There are a couple of more lines that I won't show in the video, but as always, this lead chess study is available in our Discord group, so you can check it out there as well. And then I just wanted to show you this one line, Queen's Gambit declined as well. So we're going to go with the same approach, right? We're going to play knight f3, bishop g5, black's going to defend, we're going to play e3, all of the same idea. I would recommend to always play the Queen's Gambit like this, because it's in these lines that we do have the crazy attack. So definitely always try to go for this. Black castles, we develop the knight. Okay, black plays knight to d7 here, which is a little bit different, right? Because now they are defending this. So we're going to continue with the plan, queen c2, h6, and here I would not recommend you capture, because of course if you capture, the knight's just going to take, and well, the entire plan basically with h4 and g4 doesn't really work, because this knight is also stopping it, and it's a little bit too dangerous to go for this with white. So against these variations, I would recommend to just be safe and not capture. You can always move back the bishop here to h4 if you want. And then black might play something like c5, which I also talked about previously. That's always a good counterattack they have. You can often exchange here in the center, capture, and you will get something like this. You might get something else, of course, depending on the moves. But this is just the Queen's Gambit declined. We're going to just have normal development. For example, bishop here, b6. We're going to castle, bishop b7. And that's the plan. We're going to put the rook here, and we're just going to try to play positional chess. We're going to try to improve our pieces ever so slightly. We are going to fight for the open files, as I just showed you here, these open files. We're going to have to improve this knight somewhere. Maybe it's going to zigzag like this. Maybe it's going to go like that. The knight's probably going to head for this d6 square. Sometimes we can actually plug the knight here in e5, sometimes go there. So white still has a couple of ideas, but with good defense, as always, with good defense, black can most likely try to force a draw. But I really wanted to show you this idea because I think it's pretty incredible.